The Willow Creek John Doe, identified as William Melvin Toller. We begin today in Willow Creek, California, when on April 28, 1968, teens were sifting through some debris stored on the east side of the Berry Summit amongst a pile of rocks that were found there. The area itself had been used by granite construction in 1965 for storage of debris that was cleared from a flood that had occurred in 1964. As the teens would sift through the items that they found, they would suddenly realize that they'd discovered a skull. More remains were found and would be sent to the FBI in Washington, D.C. for examination at the Smithsonian Institute. They would eventually be buried in 1968 in the Ocean View Cemetery. It appeared the only conclusion at the time was that it was a male between 45 and 60. This would be the end of investigation until December of 2010, and they would try again to attempt to identify him, this time using DNA. His DNA was then submitted to CODIS, but no match was ever made. 12 years would pass. The Humboldt County Sheriff's Office and the California Department of Justice would partner with Othram Labs to attempt the more complicated DNA that was needed for genetic genealogy. As I've honestly come to expect, Othram pulled it off again, and then they would begin tracing the DNA in hopes of finding his name. This would eventually lead to a woman named Anona, who was thought to possibly be his daughter. She would go ahead and provide her own DNA, and it would confirm this. She would tell the officers she last saw her father when she was 8. She would share that her dad had actually joined the Marine Corps in 1942 when he was only 15. He lied on his paperwork and went ahead and served his country, but he was then injured in combat in the South Pacific, eventually returning to the U.S., where he would graduate from the University of Idaho with a degree in psychology. He would eventually, just prior to the Korean War, re-enlist and be deployed to Korea. However, he was older, and his return to the U.S. was not as smooth as his prior return. Anona would say that her mom shared with her that he was just a different man. As a result, they divorced in 1957, and William just sort of disappeared. William would have been just 30 at the time. They did know that he had post-traumatic stress disorder brought on by stints in combat. Right now, they need friends or family members to come forward with information if possible. It does appear, however, that he may have perished in the flood that took place in 1964, 4 years prior to being found in 68. Assuming he passed in 1964, William would have been 37. He would have been 41 the year his remains were found. Thank you on behalf of Crimehound to William Toller for his service to our country. William Toller went unidentified for 56 years. Had William survived, he'd be 97 years old today. Jane Tropicana Doe, identified as Linda Anderson, also known as Linda Sue Andrews. We begin this case on April 18, 1993, in Henderson, Nevada, which is just outside of Las Vegas. A scientist was conducting environmental research near the intersection of Tropicana Avenue and Durango Drive. In 1993, the area was considered remote desert, although now it's considered part of the Las Vegas metropolitan area. It was here that the scientist noticed an area that was covered by a quilt and rocks. Underneath this marked area were the remains of a woman who'd been buried pretty shallowly in the ground. They would examine her and discover she'd been the victim of multiple gunshots. They believe she'd been there since around 1991, which would make it about 2 years. They would nickname her Jane Tropicana Doe, and they searched really hard to try to figure out what happened, but there were no leads and nothing else stood out. As a result, it would take 3 decades and the magic of Othram Labs to finally find her name. Linda Anderson, also known as Linda Sue Andrews, was actually from Henderson, Nevada, which was where she was found. Part of the problem is that she was never reported missing. Her daughter would say that she last spoke to her in June of 1991 by phone. Linda had remarried, and she lived with her husband at the time, a husband who did not report her missing. Her kids kept calling, and when they didn't get an answer, they came to talk, and he would just tell the kids that she was gone. Because she'd been struggling with some mental health symptoms at the time, it wasn't for sure that she wouldn't just disappear. There are questions, however, why the husband didn't report her missing, and the fact of the way the blanket was placed. It's not for me to judge, but This is one of those that probably make for strong questioning of the husband. Linda's daughter would tell the authorities that she was a really good mom when she was doing well. Her mental illness meant, however, that wasn't always the case. And sometimes her kids would find themselves being the ones taking care of their mom. But when it was good, it was really good, and they had wonderful memories to fall back on. While it doesn't specifically say, I think she had her kids at a younger age and they were possibly out on their own. It's unclear if the stepdad is still alive. If I find any more out on this, I will place it on the screen now. Anyone with any information can call Crime Stoppers anonymously at 702-385-5555. Linda Sue Anderson was missing for 32 years, and an unidentified Jane Doe for 30. Had she lived the life she deserved, she would be 68 years old today. The Brisbane Jane Doe, identified as Tanya Glover. We begin today on December 7th, 2022, in Fortitude Valley, Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. For those like me who weren't familiar, the area itself in Fortitude Valley is pretty small. It has a population of about 7,000 people. However, Brisbane itself is really large. It has 2.3 million people. A wall was found under an apartment complex, and when they removed it, they would find a person inside. It was clear she'd been there for quite some time, likely around 7 to 13 years. She'd been partially buried and wrapped in multiple layers of clothing and bedding. For whatever reason they did this, it actually ended up helping preserve the remains. Upon examination, they found several signs of trauma that were not disclosed publicly. Although it was clearly suspicious, they weren't able to identify her COD. The authorities set to work speaking with current and past residents of the apartment building, but no one knew where she was, and no one even remembered the wall being placed there. We know now that Tanya Lee Glover was 38 when she went missing from that same area. However, she was estranged from her family, and so she wasn't reported missing. The police have learned she was both hearing and visually impaired and unable to work. As a result, she kept to herself. There's no indication she was even living in that complex where she was found. As a result, they really need someone to come forward. And Australia is absolutely amazing in what they do with rewards. They seem to place large ones on cases that are unlikely to be solved without someone coming forward. It appears that there are up to $500,000 is being offered for relevant information on this case. Tanya Lee Glover was missing for 11 years. She went unidentified for 8 months. Had she lived, she would be 39 years old today. Huge thanks for watching all the way to the end, and a big thanks to all of you who consistently like and comment on the videos. Whether you leave a full comment or an emoji, it makes a huge difference. The whole dance with YouTube is hard sometimes. I gain only about 350 subs a month. So if you consistently watch my videos, maybe take a moment to subscribe. It's a huge push toward the videos being suggested to new people. The next goal is 20,000. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other.